Is there such a thing as the perfect place to create your art? I don't think so, because you know what? Perfect doesn't exist. You know what perfect is? It's all those expertly curated photos we see online, and we absolutely drool with envy. And then they make us feel so intimidated that we never want to share our own work with the rest of the world.
When we bought this house, it was a fixer-upper, which meant we had a lot of decisions to make. We had 3 bedrooms, so there was the master bedroom, and then there was an office for my husband, and then there was this room that I could use for me, however I wanted. When I said I wanted an art studio, the contractor suggested that we build me a she shed, a building of my very own, out at the back of the property.
There was nothing there yet. We had lots of room, and I kind of started to get excited. I could imagine what it could be like.
I saw this enclosed walkway to take you from the house out to the studio. I was gonna have water and electricity and all this room. It was going to be absolutely perfect. Except remember perfect? It doesn't exist. It was also going to be expensive, and we were on a budget. But more than that, at that time in my life, I didn't really feel comfortable calling myself an artist. I felt like an imposter. And an imposter, well, she didn't deserve to have this big, expensive, perfect place to create. So I took over the smallest, darkest room in the house. And every time I stepped in here, it made me feel claustrophobic. And I absolutely could not imagine how I was going to make this room into a room of my very own. I still had this vision of perfection in my head. I had all these boards on Pinterest, and I would look at the artist studios and I would imagine that the artist was perfect, which meant their art was perfect, which meant that they were very, very successful artists. And me, I was the imposter.
I just kept feeding into this illusion of perfection. I couldn't shake it from my brain, and the reality was I wasn't going to get perfect. I was going to have to figure out how to make this room work for me.
Sure, I wanted a space that was very functional, a place that I could lay out all my fabric, my fibers, all my supplies were right there at hand, and I wanted it to be functional as well as pretty. But it was more than that. I wanted to be able to grab a cup of coffee or a snack whenever I wanted, and I wanted the dog to be able to wander in and out without anybody having to get up and open a door for her. And I wanted to be able to hear my husband's laughter when he was working in the next room.
So we angled some walls, replaced the tiny little window with a patio door, and I worked with a local woodworker who helped me design an island in the center of the room with shelves all the way around, and it might be my favorite piece in the studio.
Other artists told me that I should paint all the walls white, but I found a green that was so perfect. We ended up painting every wall in the house the same color.
I have a very indulgent husband who was okay with me taking over more than just that little room. Eventually, I ended up expanding into the living room because that was the perfect place for my 2 big old oak desks that I loved from the old house. And they turned out to be perfect workstations for me in here. And then I took over the hall closet that we were putting in supposedly for all the coats, and instead became home for all my fabric. None of this stuff happened right away. My studio space has been an evolution over the last 6 or 7 years. At first I thought I wanted everything hidden so it would be nice and neat and protected from dog hair, which is a joke because there's dog hair on everything that I have to check before I ship. Then I realized that I needed to see things. I needed to have clear containers so I knew what I had, because otherwise I forgot I had it and I'd go out and buy some more. Yes, I save everything. All those little scraps of fabric and lace. I can't bear to throw anything away, and I almost always find a use for it. And am I the only one that saves threads? I mean, I obsessively save all my threads and then eventually sort them into colorways. And then I will often make cordage from it, which then I can turn into a basket.
It took me a while, but I finally figured out that you don't need the world's version of perfect to create your art. You only need your version. And that version's probably going to change over time because we evolve as artists over time. My studio used to be filled primarily with paper. Now it's filled primarily with fabric and fibers and beads. Right now, your perfect spot might be sitting on the couch with your art in your lap. Or it might be that you have to wait until you're finished with dinner, you've done all the dishes, and you can claim the kitchen table for your art. Or maybe you have to lay everything out on the bed during the daytime while you're working on it, and then at night you have to clean off the spots so you can crawl into bed and go to sleep. But you can't wait for a perfect place to create because it doesn't exist.
All that time chasing perfection was really nothing more than an excuse to not create because I was afraid. And I was afraid to create because I was afraid I was going to fail and I was going to be judged because I felt like an imposter. But you know what happened when I started to create my perfect just for me place? I started to let go of a lot of my fears about trying to be perfect with my art. And I embraced what I thought were imperfections, finally, because what I figured out was they were really just me finding my own style. And most of all, I stopped feeling like an imposter. Well, at least most of the time. If you'd like to see more of my art and my studio, whether it's clean or messy, head on over to my website, SusanTaylorBrown.com. While you're there, you can sign up for the newsletter, and that'll keep you informed of anything that's going on in my creative life.